Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today from New York City, Ariel Hyatt, who is a publicist, but more importantly, an author of The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity, proven strategies for getting featured in blogs, playlists, and traditional media. Now, let me preface this conversation by saying we get sent quite a few books. And most of them, if not all of them, are very worthy reads. However, what do you actually get out of that? And I started to go through your book and I went, holy cow, this lady's got game. Welcome to the show.
Wow. Thank you.
You wrote this book, and I understand the reasoning for writing it, and I obviously want to go down that trail. But let's start in the very beginning. You got into the publicity game, from what I read, at a fairly early age. You were like between your freshman and sophomore year, and it really wasn't what you thought it was going to be.
That is true.
Tell us a little bit about that experience of flying to London and working for this PR firm. And that was really actually a short-lived tenure, wasn't it?
Oh, it certainly was. So when I was in college, my mother, who was a career counselor and actually very good at determining what other people should do with their lives, determined that I was a good communicator. And she thought I might be interested in public relations, and then asked, a teenager, what would you be interested in doing public relations for? And I said fashion. So she pulled every string in the book, and I ended up with an internship at a fashion PR firm. And it was between my freshman and sophomore year in college. And lo and behold, now we know that fashion PR firm, which was called is still called Lynn Franks Limited, was and is the PR firm that they based the television show Absolutely Fabulous, Ab Fab, on. And so if you've seen Ab Fab, it's a kind of a send-up parody of these sort of horrible people in fashion. So there I was. I got on an airplane knowing absolutely no one in London, having never been there. And I rented a room and I showed up at work and got indoctrinated into a horrific summer where I realized people in London, especially in the early 90s, didn't love Americans. That was sort of the first lesson. The second lesson was people from a certain type of place in a certain type of community also didn't appreciate. Historically, I didn't understand what I was stepping into. I didn't understand the way that the British operate and work, coming from scrappy United States, where pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps and learning on your own and all of that is valued. I found a lot of life lessons in that very bizarre summer, but I did also learn how publicity worked and what publicity was, and how people at the top of their game, which they were, function.
But you didn't give up from there. You came back to the States. You got into the music publicity business, which is, in a sense, is different than fashion, I would assume.
It is.
And you started to go down this path of helping other acts. And of course, you're a huge advocate for the independent artist. What drove you to write this book, The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity?
This is my 6th book, and it came directly as a result of COVID and being on lockdown and watching the music industry collapse in front of my face. And at the time I had a newborn and I was, locked in my house in Brooklyn and, watching as many live streams as I could humanly consume and trying to support artists that all of a sudden had their livelihoods taken away. And I realized one thing that would absolutely be on the chopping block for so many artists would be they would no longer have publicity budgets, because any kind of money that they might have been getting from touring or anything else, mostly touring, was not going to be happening for them. And I thought now is a really good time to put a handbook out that could help artists step themselves through publicity and how to do it. And also, I probably would have written that book anyway, because the reality is the publicity game has changed so many times that I wasn't finding any really clear, concise information. Certainly there are chapters of some books, and there's a lot of pedagogical textbook kind of things that teach how to do publicity, but there wasn't really a guide since the Billboard guide, which was written in the early 90s. It was just a publicity music guide. So I wanted to fill that hole.
I think also in your book, in fact, in the very first chapter, you talk about the old music business paradigm versus the new music business paradigm. And a lot of that took place even long before COVID entered our lives. And that almost sort of that shape-shifting was really a whole new world when it came to publicity.
That's true. And I think one thing that we're really good at in the music business is grasping onto the past and trying to recreate the glory days. And I think for musicians, especially now with so many independent musicians coming up through the ranks and trying to figure it out, antiquated paradigms are harmful. And I still hear from, on a weekly basis at my agency, artists who have been given terrible advice. And the terrible advice is, now that your record is recorded, the next step should be hire a publicist, which I absolutely disagree with in most cases. I think there's many steps between finishing a great album or great single or EP, whatever you're making, and trying to get publicity.
When we talk about publicity, and you obviously mentioned in the book, and that is that publicity is a long game, and I agree with that statement, but we look at publicity different these days than we used to, because the media that we look at has changed dramatically in the aspect of, we're not looking at so many print publications anymore. It's much more digital in that world. Is it easier or more difficult to get press and publicity these days than it was, say, maybe 10 years ago?
So much more difficult. No question. No question.
And why is that?
First of all, so many publications just don't exist anymore. So I think about back in my days when I was running a traditional PR firm, I had a database of tens of thousands of daily newspapers, weekly newspapers, specialty newspapers, magazines in every city and town that had like all kinds of cool angles, so much print. Radio was not owned by two companies. You could still go into almost any market and find radio stations where you could create publicity opportunities. Venues, for that matter, also were not owned by one company. And it was pre-conglomeration. Also, if you had niche marketing possibilities, if you had like a woman in your band or someone was Irish, there was an Irish publication in almost every city, or a Jewish publication, or a Black publication, or even at every newspaper, there were several individual arts writers. You had a jazz writer, you had a classical music writer, a pop and rock guy. So all of that just went away, basically. So the opportunities became fewer. And then even in the digital space, what we saw was the rise of the music blog, which became almighty for several years. They had a great run. And now what we're finding is that also got sort of segmented and smashed apart. And now it's more about individual tastemakers, playlisters, and of course, so many of us get recommendations and ideas and suggestions about what to listen to through social media channels, which have nothing to do with the media.
Also, you covered in your book that the publicity is really not designed to sell music. It's a marketing tool in promoting the act. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes. And it used to be deeply connected to sales, of course. And there are still unicorn moments that can happen. Like if you get the Today Show Plaza look, you'll see a spike in your plays the next week. Or if you've got like a colossally amazing Grammy performance, you will see your streams go up and perhaps your sales get a little bump there as well. But for the most part, those opportunities are not created for mere mortal musicians. They're created for, 0.0001% of artists.
So with that being said, the idea, the aspect of being on Letterman or Jimmy Kimmel or, as you said, the Today Show Plaza, those aren't realistic for 99.9% of the independent artists. So where does the independent artist go these days to get noticed and hopefully get some of that recognition?
Part of it has to do, I think, with creating your own roadmap. And that is something I've seen over and over again. And so there's no one size fits all formula. Every artist needs to look at what success looks and feels like for them. They also need to look at what their lane is, because it's going to be a different kind of media look depending on who the artist is and what their capabilities are. Of course, now we're seeing so much media that is created around an artist is self-created. Look at TikTok. You have to get on there and post multiple times a week to get traction. And sometimes when you're very good at creating your own social media, the larger media looks will begin to come, just because if you've got millions and millions of views, you're so good they can't ignore you, as Cal Newport would say. So it's important to look at what your personal roadmap is and ask yourself, where are my fans? Where are they consuming media? And how do you figure out a path to get to that media? And that media, I've seen this time and time again, artists landing in top shelf, top tier, coveted publications like the New York Times or the LA Weekly or Rolling Stone, still in existence, and then not seeing a great result, because what they didn't realize was just because they got in that publication, it might not be read by the right audience and it might not do the thing you wanted it to do.
On the show with us today from New York, Ariel Hyatt, who is a publicist and the author of the book, The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity, Proven Strategies for Getting Featured in Blogs, Playlists, and Traditional Media.
Hi, I'm Megan Shanley, the author of children's book, Vincent Plays His Part, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hey, this is Jack Sharkey, host of Between the Notes. Take a break from all the turmoil in the world and join us each week as we explore the magic, mystery, and beauty of music. Between the Notes, a podcast dedicated to everything music, available everywhere you get your podcasts.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back on the show with us, Ariel Hyatt, who is the author of The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity. You touched on it briefly, and I want to dig a little deeper in that arena, and that is social media. Knowing your audience, not knowing your audience. Of all of the social media platforms out there these days, I mean, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got YouTube, we've got TikTok, we've got Twitter. Do all of them make sense to be sharing your information, your little kind of blurbs, news breaks, whatever? Or should you spend the time to really find out who your audience is and where are those demographics going to pick you up more than another? Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. I think here's the truth. There's billions of people on all of those platforms. There's maybe not billions on Twitter this week, but there are billions of people on these platforms. And so the question isn't really where are they, because they are on all of those platforms. The question is, where do you feel most attracted? Like if you're really good at making videos, then maybe TikTok, which may not be in our country forever, might be your platform, or YouTube Shorts. You're great at video content, then you could do really well on those platforms. If you're really a great writer and you write in a poetic way and you're good at long form communication, maybe long Facebook posts with a lot of text is the way that you're going to break through and find an audience. So I think you really want to ask yourself what suits you best before you start trying to shove yourself into a platform that might not feel comfortable or great for your brand as an artist. And then from there, once you can get what you're good at and where you can create good content, it's then learning how to leverage those areas where you're strong. And it's okay to not be everywhere all the time, but definitely be somewhere really well.
Almost as if creating that cornerstone of a building, you have to start somewhere. How do you rise above all of that white noise that is out there? I mean, there's literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of artists out there these days. They're all trying to get the same piece of real estate to plant their flag and say, look at me. And we discussed that already. It's very difficult. It's a very competitive field. How do you rise above that chaff in the best way possible? And maybe I should say, is it even possible as an independent artist?
I think it is possible. And I see it every day with my clients. And the way to do it, and this sounds, everybody's going to have an eye roll moment in a second, but authenticity is still key. And I think we have another giant tidal wave coming at us, which we should definitely mention, which is AI and ChatGPT now is going to allow us to create even more content faster. Videos through AI. We're looking at images that can come through DALL-E or Midjourney. This is going to flood social media sites with even more content, most of which won't even be touched upon by a human with a brain. And that's going to cause even more trouble. But I am optimistic that when an artist can figure out what their true voice is and how to express it to their fans, that's the cornerstone. And that's why I say, don't go out and hire a publicist. A publicist will never get fans for you, not real, true fans that love you and follow you everywhere. What will do that is going to come from you. So that is how you begin to get some of that real estate. And it's not a sexy part of your journey as an artist, but it is critical. And I've seen it in so many cases that artists that really understand how to find and connect with audience and make real fans, they're the ones that have the long-term success.
I'm going to jump ahead also in your book because as the host of a podcast show, this always is an important thing for me. In chapter 22, you talk about how to rock the interview. And we have artists on the show all the time. And as a guest, I want to engage them so they can in turn entertain, inform, and educate the listening audience. It's not as easy as a lot of people think, is it?
No, it's not. And this is the thing. I mean, someone might be really captivating as a musician. And we've all seen this, right? You go out and see live music and someone is absolutely electrifying while they're playing and singing, but then they go to the stage banter in between and you're thinking, how is this possible that this is the same human being? So it is a gift and a talent, and not everybody has it. Plus, I think we need to take into account that many, many musicians are naturally introverted and not great at talking. And then many suffer from mental health things and they've got social anxiety and all the other things that you can add into that category. And so it might feel wildly uncomfortable to just get on and have a chat.
How do you go about becoming that star interviewee then? Is this practice makes perfect, or how did you develop that skill, that talent to be kind of that wonderkind that stands out on a television show, or as you said, the talking segment, the speaking segment in between songs, or on a podcast?
I think there is media training, and certainly you can go after it. And there are tips and tricks and techniques, but I think you either have it or you don't have it. And I've seen this time and time again. There's artists that I've followed for my entire adult life, and I'm not young. So 20, 30 years of watching and seeing. Sometimes when artists can realize where their strengths are, they do fewer talky interviews and they talk less and they let their music speak for themselves, or they're very good at maybe using Discord or blogging or writing long form newsletters or content. And maybe that's a better medium. I don't know that you can, if you're deeply, deeply allergic to the art of the interview, you've got to choose your interviews really, really carefully and then prepare really well, for sure.
Press kits, whether it's an EPK or otherwise, are those things that are still viable? And let me preface that by saying I had an electronic press kit sent to me some months back for someone that wanted to be on the show as a guest. And it was like, 13, 14, 15 pages long. And I was like, I don't have the time nor the bandwidth to go through this. Do press kits make sense? And what would you consider, in your terms, really kind of the best or the perfect press kit, electronic or otherwise, to present?
Now, there's a reason why radio programmers created one sheets from the dawn of time, right? There's the one page that explains in very brief detail why a programmer should care and what the focus track is. And here's maybe a photo of the album cover so you could locate it in the stacks. But really, that's an art. It's an art creating a very quick one page or one paragraph pitch so that you don't exhaust the people that you're trying to get the attention of. And then understanding that if they are interested and they ask for additional context, sending a 15-page thing could be appropriate, but only in rare instances. We are at a point of very little attention span. So I think artists really do need to understand how to create very effective pitching materials and EPKs that do exactly what they're supposed to do, which is help them land a result without exhausting anyone in the process.
Does that become the role of the publicist? Is that where someone such as yourself would step in and be retained by the client, by the artist, to help to put that together?
You would be amazed how many times I have seen publicists that don't do that work. They just kind of take whatever the artist provides, like the bio that the artist already had prepared, and they use that. I think a really good publicist who's worth their weight in everything should be looking at that. What does this artist look like? What does the pitch look like? What does their bio look like when I land on any social site? What will people experience if they go and try to find this artist using the Google? That's very important. And that's an art that the best publicists will pay attention to. And that is something that if you do hire a publicist or someone to help you, you've got to really understand that you've got to shore up your brand and make sure it's comprehensible across social channels and on your website and everywhere else. before the publicity starts.
Is this where the SEO comes into play, that search engine optimization? Is that really where you do your homework?
SEO is important when it comes to building websites, of course, and it's pretty amazing to me how few artists actually really think about SEO and think about, how they are appearing when people search for them. We're going to see a rise now at Bing, so it's not just Google that we're going to have to pay attention to, but it is critical to understand what is showing up and how the outside world perceives you through a very, very small lens, which might be the lens of a Google search.
On the show with us today, Ariel Hyatt, who is a publicist out of New York, but is also the author of The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity, Proven Strategies for Getting Featured in Blogs, Playlists, and Traditional Media.
This is Sharon Kendrew, President and CEO of High Road Incorporated, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back on the show, all the way from Brooklyn, New York, Ariel Hyatt, who is the author of The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity. PR, when we talk about getting press, and we used to, in the business, we focused a lot on long-term press, getting 90 to 120 days out. Is that business model still in play?
In very rare instances, yes. If you're looking to get a holiday gift guide in Vanity Fair or, a major publication that's printed in China and shipped back to the United States, as some publications are. But for the most part, the pitching to placement time frame has shrunk dramatically in recent years.
What about live press? You're going to go out and do a tour. It's going to maybe be 30 dates or 60 cities, 90 markets, something like that. Does live press make sense? I'm assuming it does. And how far out ahead of the game do you get that into motion?
If you're looking to get into major publications in major metropolitan or pretty much any market that has a publication, you definitely need to be planning at least a couple of months in advance. If you think about summer touring and how that happens, so many different things happening once summer hits. You've got outdoor venues coast to coast and so many people hitting the road and different festivals and tours and mega tours and package tours. There's a lot of competition out there for not a lot of column inches. So if traditional media is what you're looking for, you better have really, really good plans and get out ahead of that by a couple of months for sure. Then, of course, there's smaller media and smaller online press that, again, will have much shorter times. But it's pretty amazing how far in advance people will plan their live show coverage.
And now we have a whole new world out there, which is publicity in live streaming. That's something that, 10 years ago, we definitely didn't talk about. And maybe 5 years ago, we were starting to make sense of it all and going, okay, this is a tool that I can use. How does publicity fit in with live streaming?
I think we had our major gold star moment with publicity and live streaming, especially during the pandemic when not very many people were out and about and artists still wanted to connect with their fans and be seen. And of course, we had a meteoric rise of platforms and different ways that you could consume live stream. And what's interesting about that is now that we have the fallout from that, I think more artists realize that live streaming is a really interesting and exciting way to connect, especially if you have a global audience. It's harder to go do a tour around the world, but pretty easy to do a live stream and have people from all over the place come and see you. So I'm not sure how excited the media really are to cover live stream performances at this point, because there's a lot going on in the real world. But I think live streaming is critical and important for artists who are looking to connect to fans, especially artists that have fans all over the world or all over the country. It is obviously much easier to get in front of your laptop than it is to get out in the van and get to the next town.
And obviously, you run your company, which is Cyber PR Music. You're the authors, you said, of 6 books, this one being one of them. If someone wants to order this book, how do they go about getting a copy of it? Because once again, I'm going to say, this is a great read. It's not heavy reading, but it's so informative, especially for the independent artist. How can someone go about and get a copy of this?
Well, there's this little website you might not have heard of called Amazon.com. Guys should write it down. I think it's going to be hot. You can find me on Amazon, and that's probably the fastest way. Also at barnesandnoble.com. Does anyone buy books anywhere else? That would be where you could go. Or you could come to my website at cyberprmusic.com, and I'll sell you a digital copy right there.
Ariel, thank you so much for being on the show. This was great.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.